welcome to this special episode of Mind the Gap, making education work across the globe, with me, Tom Sherrington, and here's Emma.
Oh my God, these are getting longer and longer, these introductions. Thank you. Hello, good evening. How are you?
Yeah, really well. And the reason it's special is because it's our last one of the season, season 4. It's been an epic year, and we're absolutely thrilled to be joined to round off our season by the one and only Yamina Bibi. Hello, Yamina.
Hi, Tom. Hi, Emma. I can't believe I'm the last one. This is very exciting now. I've just told you I'm starstruck, so.
Honestly, don't be. But honestly, we're really pleased to get you on here, and I've been really enjoying reading your book, thriving in your first few years, which is fantastic. And we've met a couple of years ago in person. Sort of, it's harder, isn't it, online world? And you're one of the people who kindly gave us a kind of a comment about our walkthroughs 3. So you have been Ollie calved, and you're on the back of that book. That's fantastic.
Brilliant.
But you do so many things, and we're really interested to talk to you about the roles that you've got. So rather than us doing that, this is your chance. Just tell people who might not know, about you, what your job role is, what your interests are, and the sort of things that you've been doing recently.
Thank you. So currently I'm a deputy head teacher of maternity cover. I've been doing that since January this year, and it's been a really exciting thing. But my first love is teaching and learning and really driving kind of improvement. And we've got this motto at my school about improve and not prove. So I'm really passionate about that. I've been in education. I started in 2010 as a teacher, and I'm moving into my 14th, 15th year, and it's just been brilliant. And I'm really interested over the years from moving from a kind of NNQT, or what we now call an ECT, and what my experiences were like in an inner city London, Lewisham school, starting off. I was quite a shy, quiet teacher, quite introverted, and then have become this person. And nobody ever believes me when I say I used to be really shy and introverted. They're like, you're a liar. And I think, through coaching and mentoring, I've been really able to, we talk about eliciting the brilliance, but that's what my coaches have done for me. So like anyone who knows Buki Yusuf and Vivian Porritt and Hannah Wilson, those are name drops for a reason, because they've been so instrumental in my career, and that's what I've started to do with others as well. So I'm really passionate about teaching, learning, coaching, mentoring, implementing that within my own organization, but then also trying to roll that out and support colleagues nationally, and starting to kind of make that work happen globally as well, to really ensure that teachers stay in the profession. I think that's ultimately, I think of myself as a system leader. And all my, sisters are teachers. We're really driven and passionate about teaching, because that's what my parents taught us. And they grew up in Bangladesh. They didn't have formal education. My dad came here when he was 20 as a kind of economic migrant, and, really wanted us to be teachers because, and I talk about this a lot, education, he believed, was the passport or the gateway to success. And I grew up in Tower Hamlets, very kind of working class, poor, quite impoverished, what they call disadvantaged. And to be able to be in this position now, I'm really driven by this desire to close that gap for our young people, and for them to see role models that look like them, so that they can aspire and then be what they either can see or they can't see. And I become really found the purpose in my work through diversity, equity, inclusion work, which is is where I'm heading next as a diverse ed associate trainer. I've been a podcast co-host with my lovely colleague Nick Bentley, who's also part of LGBT Ed, and we've done lots of work around diversity, equity, inclusion work through teaching and learning at my school, through the curriculum, and really ensuring that every child's voice and every person's voice is represented. There's a lot. I'm also a women-led network leader for London, and I'm again really driven by this desire to see women in education succeed, whatever their circumstances. So it's lots of people misunderstand it and they think it's only about leadership, but I don't think Women Ed is about that. It's a global charity organization for a reason, because it's about ensuring that all women have access to leadership, but whatever they want to do in education, and they can do it, and they'll get the support from us as Women Ed. And that's about providing those aspirational role models for them, but also providing them with safe spaces to say, hey, this is what I'm experiencing, this is what I'm feeling, and then having a listening ear, essentially. I don't know if I've summed that up very well, by the way. I just go on and on, so you'll need to.
That's like, I was thinking, it's because you do so many things. It takes quite a long time to say all of it.
I know, sorry, you just wanted to like take an introduction.
No, I mean, it's amazing. I do think it's inspiring listening to you, because I feel like, you know, the journey that you've been on individually, but then obviously your commitment to want to support other people to do the same. Like, I think that's amazing, and I love the fact you've referenced, you know, people like Vivian Porritt, Hannah Wilson, other people who you have, you know, supported you, and now you want to do the same. So, and we'll talk a bit about what you're going to do next in a bit later on, but I suppose the reason why the trigger for us to say, you know, let's get Yamina on the podcast is because of the book that you're writing and that's come out, which is, you know, you sent me a copy, and so I'm a bit disappointed. I can't wave it now because it's a PDF. You can't wave a PDF. So I've got it.
Wave like a part of your computer, like wave the mouse.
I've got it here in front of me, and it's called it's in the Little Guide series, and thriving in your first years of teaching, a little guide for teachers. And I think it's an important theme, isn't it? Because I feel like thriving is a great way to describe it. You don't want to just survive it. You go beyond. Some books are called surviving, and I always feel there's a bit of a sort of, you know, not that subtle message about that it's going to be blooming hard, but you're going beyond that. So tell us a bit about it, Yamina. What was the kind of driver to write the book, and you know, what was your sort of who do you have in mind as the people who are going to be reading it? Is it people who've before they've started teaching, or people kind of already partly in?
Yeah, I think I'm going to start with the reason why. So I was actually approached by Sage Publishing and Delana Spencer, which is brilliant. And I was like, what do you know, I think you should write something. And I said, no way. Who am I? I'm nobody. Genuinely for about 6 months. And then eventually she realized that, you know, something my dad always taught me was, you want to leave a legacy in this world. And what's the legacy you're going to leave? Delana must have read some blog I wrote. And she said, remember you said that? And, you know, when you're gone, what's your legacy? I was like, oh God. And she said, you know, a book captures those words and it continues your legacy when you're not there. And I thought that was so powerful. And as an English teacher, I genuinely believe in that. So that's kind of where it came about. And then I had a kind of list of ideas, but actually what I felt really passionate about, because I was mentoring at the time and observing all these brilliant teachers with varying levels of experience, and realizing that lots of our early career teachers really needed that further support, but not just in teaching and learning, which is what everyone thinks that they should have, right? Curriculum. Let's get them to understand how to stand at threshold and those sorts of things, which is very important. But I think there's a lot of that being done. For me, the book is more about, is partly about that, but it's also about the softer skills that nobody ever teaches you. How do you even apply for a job? What does an interview lesson look like? What do they want from us? You know, what does it mean when they talk about wider professional roles? How do I build relationships across my school? Like, I'm a bit of an introvert. What do I do? I mean, I'm not me, because I'm not an introvert, but you know, those sorts of soft skills that nobody teaches you, and everyone thinks that you should know, and makes an assumption that at whatever age that you'll know that, because, you know, you're grown up now, you're a teacher now. And I think that's what I've tried to write, a book that is essentially really easy to read, really accessible. I'm not into highfalutin language because I just don't use that language, but I'm just about what's basic, what's really accessible that anyone can pick up, go into any chapter and go, hey, you know what, that's going to be really helpful for me at this point in my career. And I've tried to write it, even though it's specifically for early career teachers, both ITT thinking about teaching as a profession, but also maybe doing first level years of teaching, or even post that, because some of the chapters talk about things like how to support your, how do you give feedback, how do you receive feedback. Who's ever taught, whoever's ever taught that about radical candor and about how to build trust in relationships? And lots of early career teachers are never taught that, but we know lots of early career teachers. I know lots of early career teachers who are really aspirational, but they're just stopped because it's like, oh, but you're a new teacher. Let's just try and focus on getting things right in the classroom. That is absolutely important. But I do think that if we want to keep them and we want them to think big, we need to get them to think big and we need to teach them those things. So I have like case studies in there from a varying kind of colleagues who talk about kind of their own wisdom and share some of that wisdom and things that they've learned. And essentially, it's actually a book for me when I was an NQT, because I was a really struggling NQT. I'm 4'11", if you can't tell. I am tiny, and I grew up kind of born and bred in Tower Hamlets, did my degree there, did everything there. And then I was like, oh, do I teach in Tower Hamlets? Let's be honest, my parents were like, yes, stay in Tower Hamlets, don't go anywhere else, stay within our community. And I went, no. And I decided to go and work in Lewisham. And the reason I did that is because I wanted to broaden my horizons. I wanted to kind of, was like this 22-year-old NQT. I was like, no, I want to try something different. And I put myself in this school, and it was at the time a good school. Within 2 weeks of my NQT year, became under special measures, with my head teacher, at the time gone, 2 interim head teachers, and me as an NQT going, oh my God, what have I got myself into? Really struggling with behavior, really struggling with racism, Islamophobia from staff and students. This is, 2010. Lots of kind of parents being very Islamophobic. I was the only, woman of Asian heritage and hijab wearing teacher there. It was hard. And
Wow.
I had an amazing mentor, you see, and I talk about her and I dedicate, I've got an acknowledgement in the book for Teresa Dunseith, because if it wasn't for her, I would have left teaching. Not even the school, I would have left teaching. And I didn't want to disappoint my parents who'd invested so much in us being teachers.
So that experience then has been partly what you've been think was in your head. So you're thinking, because what I did, you're right. I mean, the book that you've written it deals with it as some stuff which is, you might say, is so mundane because it's sort of very functional, but yet it's the stuff which trips you up. So I'm just going to sample a couple of things here, which kind of, I'm not scrolling down here. You talk about things like literally before you arrive at the school, things like, how do I,
I know. John's laughing now. It's true.
but how do I, but some of them are serious and some are not, like things like just getting organized, who do I ask? And it's like, and there's something reassuring about the fact that you've written that list, which is that if someone is thinking, gosh, it's acknowledged as a thing to ask, stuff about just that the admin of a school, but then it doesn't get some more serious things like, who is a Senko? How do I contact them? How do I contact families? It's like, well, what's your job role in that? And I think when I was 22, I didn't have a clue.
Exactly.
I didn't even, in my teaching practice, I got told off because I didn't go in until it was my lessons, and if I had a free period, I would stay in bed and things like that. And I had to learn how to have a job. So, no, you're a professional person now.
Mm-hmm.
Do it, and it took me a while, and to kind of understand that the responsibilities of the role as well as all the pedagogical. But it's not just that. You also have some stuff to do with your behavior routines, and there is thriving in your classroom is a fantastic section where you're talking about getting to know your class, hints and tips of how to learn names quickly, all this sort of thing. I don't think I think we should explore these details because they make a difference. So are you saying that you didn't get that type of support because of the school being in turmoil?
See, no. And I think, my mentor, she helped me a lot with behavior management because that's the thing I struggled with. But no, I didn't get that basic thing. And, I'd been working since I was 16, but obviously never in a school. And people, I think, make this assumption that just because you're a teacher, you'll know all those basic, like you said, mundane things. It's true, because it's almost like, oh, hold on. That's true. Where are the photocopiers? There's a whole bit of like, where are the different photocopiers? Because they're a nightmare. They're a workload issue for me. And as an NQT, I'd be running around the whole school trying to find the right photocopier. Then I'd be late to my form time. And it's like, oh my God, you just what I thought is, what's the list that's going to help somebody get almost like a checklist? So when they're about to start a new school, they're like, okay, I need to know, make sure I got my Sims login. I have this login. I know where the photocopy. And it's almost like reducing that cognitive load for them, just making it really easy and simple so that it's all there and they can ask those sorts of questions. And I think sometimes it feels a bit silly asking those things, and you feel a bit like, oh, should I be asking about who the person I contact is when it comes to like cover, or will people make some assumptions? But actually, I've tried to make the implicit explicit in the book. And I'm not saying that I didn't receive it, but I do think, particularly as I've gone through my years in education, that where I've been the kind of professional coordinating mentors that I've worked with assume that mentees will know that stuff. And then they get really annoyed and they say, she didn't call in sick. She didn't call by 7:15, and that's the rule. And I said, well, when was that teacher taught? When did you actually explain to them who they call and what number they use and what time? Like, did you ever explain that? Oh, yeah, no, I didn't. Okay, so you're making an assumption that somebody's not following your instruction, but you've never actually given them the instruction to begin with. And it's almost like, when you think about pedagogy, it's like front loading means of participation. You've said you want them to work in silence, but have you actually told them that you want them to work in silence before you've given the instruction? You haven't. And it's exactly the same kind of thing that I've tried to channel in this book, I guess. I hope it's like patronizing, which I'm like, oh.
I don't think it is. I think that's why you've done well. Anyway, Emma, so Emma, you're an expert in working with ECTs.
Now, I was just thinking that you mean actually this book, you've written it for ECTs, but it's potentially also the alternative mentor handbook, because you, as an experienced mentor, experienced teacher, you've internalized all of that information and process. It's become completely natural, and it would be really useful to revisit that, because there's all the, like you say, there's the how to teach and all of the kind of the ECF framework type stuff, but it's really easy to forget what it's like to be a novice. So I think that book would actually be really useful for mentors to revisit and think, have I actually walked people through the very human element of actually being new at something in a new job, not just professional knowledge and professional skills, but things like, where do I get my fob from? Where's the central diary kept so I can check when the photographer's in, or all of those sorts of things that are just so useful. So I think potentially, yes, your book's for early career teachers or people thinking about teaching, but also really useful for mentors to go down as a checklist and say, have I actually checked that I have said this, so that my ECTs know exactly what it is they need to be doing or not doing in some cases.
Who was it? Tamina Begum, who's the head teacher at Forest Gate Community School, and I used to always work there. And I sent it to her. It's got a little kind of acknowledgement because she's been so brilliant. She taught me a lot about leadership, and she's the one who said, you know what, when I was an NQT, I had practically an absent mentor. And I wish I had this book, but two, I wish my mentors had it, because she could have just given it to me, or she could have used it to help me and guide me. So thank you so much for saying that, because that means a lot to me. That's kind of part of the purpose of this book as well.
And I'm just thinking, while you're talking, there is such a common thread in all of the work you do, both in terms of the book, but also the work you do with Diverse Ed, with Women Ed, with the Step Up network that you've been working with as well. There is such a uniquely human element to everything that you're doing. It's all this kind of real positive creation of championing of people, of supporting people, of providing these spaces and opportunities for deep reflective thinking, but also common sense things that sometimes get missed. And I just think you're such a voice of reason and support for people, and there's this such a uniquely human thread throughout everything that you do that's absolutely delightful to watch from afar, and to kind of see the impact that you must be having on all of those different groups that you work with. So thank you.
Thank you so much. That means so much, Emma. Thank
So,
you.
I mean, it's interesting because there's a lot in this which I'm just interested in the things you've included. So it's a kind of an important, you're sort of sensibly reflecting the fact that they're going to get input from other places as well. But then within that, you've still got what I would say was a pretty punchy and sort of neatly succinct section on lesson planning. And designing a lesson, and it's sort of, I think some of these things are really useful because you just think within the context of the whole thing of getting ready to thrive, making lesson planning seem sort of doable and not overly weighty, and just simple questions about, thinking about what you want to teach, what are you going to demonstrate, what strategy you're going to use, and the whole sequence. How would I explain new knowledge? How would I review prior learning? And it's just those prompt questions, and then a very simple kind of stuff to write in type section where you're saying, what are my successes? What would I do differently? So that, again, kind of week by week reflection tool. So you're right from the beginning, you're encouraged people to plan their lessons by thinking about the answer to those important questions and then reflecting on it as they go along. So before you did the deputy head job, you were responsible for teaching and learning in your school, weren't you? So is this some of the approaches that you has that been informed by that role that you had there?
Yeah, absolutely. And also by when I was a professional coordinating mentor at Forest Gate and leading teaching and learning there. That was I would definitely say the last 5 years being in leadership has changed the way in which I've thought about people at varying levels of experience, and particularly early career teachers. And yeah, absolutely. Being the professional coordinator mentor was different to being a mentor. I've been a mentor for a very long time, but when you're leading mentors, it's completely different, because again, we make assumptions that other mentors are doing what you're perhaps doing. And then oh yeah, actually, no, people aren't having these conversations about how to plan a lesson really quickly and efficiently. Because I say that because I would literally stay up until 1 o'clock in the morning. I was that NQT trying to perfect every little word in my lesson plan to then share with my mentor, just to seek the validation of my mentor to say, Yamina, this is amazingly meticulous planning. And then I'd get validated for that. So I'd do it again. And actually what I tried to do in the book, particularly on that chapter, is it was really hard, can I just say, because I actually wrote like a long chapter, and then I got told I had to cut it down, that this was a little guide, not a big guide. And I was like, damn it. So then I had to direct them to other people like Pepsi McRae and walkthroughs, obviously. But yeah, absolutely. It's informed by my own experiences, and then thinking about teaching and learning as a whole at both Forest Gate and at Sarah Burnell, and thinking about all the learning walks that we do, all the kind of formal observations and informal observations that we do of our early career teachers, and what support they're actually looking for. And we talk about these kind of persistent problems, or like these wicked problems, as some colleagues might call it, and then thinking about solutions for them. How do we get our colleagues who are already very overwhelmed, because there's so much to learn, right? Like as an experienced teacher, it just becomes almost like second nature, and people just think, oh, she's a great teacher. And I'm like, I'm not really not. It's just that I've got these systems in place that work for me, and I know what kind of little tricks I can do because I've been doing it for 14 years. But when you're in your first year of teaching, none of that's there. You don't have the schema and mental models to go back to and fall back on. And so I've tried to provide those models for those colleagues. And I just hope it's really, useful. And it's not meant to be pedantic. It's meant to be like, hey, here's one way you could do this, but there are lots of other ways. And here's some amazing people who know better than I do about what that might look like. And these are just things I've tried with my own mentors and my mentees, and that's worked. So that's kind of, trial and tested, essentially, I hope. They found it really useful, and I just hope others find it useful too when they've read the book.
So really, it's like in brackets, a little guide for mentors.
Maybe I should put that on my yeah, I should. That's how I should do it. The promo.
Reissue the new title. An updated title, seriously. What I wanted to ask you though about, I was reading some work that you've been doing around contextual mentor development, and I just kind of wanted to hear it from you personally, because I'm just fascinated by this idea of that. So I just wondered if you could tell us a little bit more about your approach to contextual mentor development.
I think is this from I've written kind of a little case study based on some of the work I did at Forest Gate, and really supporting mentors in actually helping them become more effective mentors. And like Hailey Hughes' book is amazing, by the way. Like I would highly recommend Hailey, obviously. But just sorry, it's an English teacher thing, I can't help it. But in terms of really thinking about the support that mentors need in developing, sometimes it's not about the ECF stuff. It's about training them up and upskilling them and providing really specific support for them. Like, how do I give effective feedback? Because lots of times mentors are in the same department as their mentees and they become almost like friends. And then you're like, oh, now I have to go in and give them some feedback. And it's really, because I used to be that person. I'm ruinously empathetic, as they, Kim Scott describes in Radical Candor. I was that person, like, that was a fantastic lesson. And then I'm like, oh God, how do I give that feedback? Because I always thought it was negative. But what we've tried to do, particularly the work I've done with mentors, is get them to understand it in a different way. And so lots of the work that we've done with mentors around Radical Candor and that book, if you haven't read it, it's brilliant, please read it. And it's about upskilling them to have those kind of conversations that are honest, authentic, and that build trust. And for me, if you read my kind of case study in Lekka, Sharma's book of Building Culture, it's all linked to that, because ECTs and NQTs, one of the things they will say is their mentors make or break them. I have friends who started their PGCE with me and who left within 2 years because of their mentors. And so if we can support mentors to really upskill them and develop them to be effective mentors, then I do think, and I'm not saying this is the only way, but one of the ways in which we can also then keep our ECTs, who then become really effective mentors themselves because they've got a really great role model that they've had. And they've also then got this mental model of, oh, that's how I do it. And so that's what kind of the work we've done. I hope that's the answer to the question.
Yeah,
You have to tell me if I'm not.
it's
Yeah.
interesting about the giving feedback to people in a department, because it feels very similar in primary school. Very often you're a very small team and you can feel really awkward going from talking to Janet about watching Strictly at the weekend to like, now I'm gonna give you some feedback.
Yeah.
It feels like quite the whiplash conversation if it's not managed particularly well. So it's really it's so useful to recognize that in itself can be a persistent problem or a barrier, is managing that shift from close working colleague to giving really professional feedback, which is why it's interesting that it needs to be framed, like you say, through the whole culture of the school and the culture of the department, which is really interesting. Which brings me on to something else I was reading about your work, about rich and specific feedback. I just thought that's a beautiful phrase you use, like how, and I was trying to wrangle with, okay, how is it rich and specific? I thought I should just ask Yamina when she's on what she means by rich and specific.
Yeah, that it moves them on, moves them forward in their practice, but is also very specific, that it's like, as they would say, get better faster. It's something that it's practicable and observable. And so a lot of the instructional coaching work that we've done at our school is based on Get Better Faster by Paul Brambrooke-Sontoyo. And obviously Tom and all his work around walkthroughs, we bought into it. I'm not gonna lie, took me a bit of persuasion, but we got there. And then Step Lab, and now we're moving into Step Lab. So we've got loads of kind of fantastic things happening. But before we had that, it was all the stuff that I'd basically created. And I'd created all these, like, based on teacher standards, created these different action plans and actions for different bits of feedback, everything and anything I could potentially think of. And then walkthroughs came and I was like, oh, blooming heck, it's done the job for me. It was great. No, it's brilliant. And Step Lab is too. So it's done all that work. But essentially, what I want is colleagues, whatever their role in a school, to be able to give really clear feedback that is practicable, is observable, but it moves colleagues forward. It's not too generic that you have no idea what's going on. Like I say in my book, I always get pace, improve your pace. I have bloody no idea what pace is, except for in a book. When I read a book, stop telling me, it used to drive me mad. Whereas actually, when I worked with Tamina Begum, she talked about countdowns. Improve your pace by giving a timer, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, punch it. And I was like, oh my God, that changed me. And that was like 7 years into my teaching. I was like, oh, I get what pace is now. But that's what I mean, that, just saying improve your pace isn't rich and it's not specific. And a mentor or, my colleague might have thought, yeah, that's really great. You haven't given me any feedback. That's not practicable and it's not observable. And I have no idea what it means. And so when we're talking about rich and, specific, that's what we mean. And I would highly recommend, obviously, walkthroughs, because I think it does that for us, and Step Lab as well, kind of joining together. What a partnership.
Yeah, we had, in fact, one of our guests a couple of episodes ago was Josh Goodridge, and we got right into this whole thing of the coaching conversation and how it has to go through these different phases. so it's so important for us to sort of be grounded by the realities of doing it. And it's obviously, and we're very aware of the stuff we wrote down. We didn't invent any of it. It's just, like you say, like people like you sort of trying to describe teaching for their school. And a lot of people are trying to do that. I tell you, one thing that I'm really interested in the fact that you include this in the book, because I could geek out with you about coaching and mentoring, about teaching.
So much.
But I'm really interested that, and for me, this is, I guess, takes me away from my kind of normal and territory, is that you talk explicitly about fostering relationships within a school culture. And, I'm fascinated by that, partly because it's not something I would ever do. I wouldn't think to write that. And I'm someone who just sort of would blunder in and just sort of make a mess or whatever. But then you're saying that let's talk to teachers about establishing network, sort of working their way into the school community, being somebody who has a kind of standing in the school community. And literally explicitly things like, well, a whole section called Building and Navigating Professional Relationships, where you talk about suggesting that, I like to spend lunchtime in the communal space with others. And you think, well, now I'm wondering whether that's come out of the fact that you've dealt with people you've mentored where they didn't do those things. And you're thinking, I need to spell this out because some people sit by themselves in their classroom all day and don't go in there. And you're kind of trying to direct them in that explicit way, like you've just talked about with PACE.
Actually, I'm that person, Tom. Nobody believes that. I am, because I spend so much of my day, and my personal life with people. I mean, I grew up in a massive family of 8 siblings, right? I just grew up with noise all the time, and I miss it sometimes. But my lunchtime was like, I'd just sit in my classroom and work. I'd never have lunch. Even now, I'm really bad at it, actually. And I very, quickly realized it was quite demoralizing, because you're spending, especially as an NQT, I was spending so much time behavior managing, really then sitting at lunchtime alone, and not because of anyone else's fault, just the way I wanted to be, and just trying to, I don't know what's just happened there. I don't know what's going on in the background. My Mac is doing some funny things, guys. I don't know how this works. I'm just going to stop using my hands. It's my ADHD. I'm so sorry.
People are just listening on Yamina's screen. She suddenly had a fireworks display in the background as some kind of screensaver. So we're just having a momentary celebration digitally of Yamina's fabulousness.
I'm so sorry. I bought a Mac recently. I didn't. My husband bought it for me, and I don't know how to use it. So I do these things, and then this kind of thing happens. And I'd sit alone, and nobody ever dragged me into community space. Not because they didn't want to, but just because I preferred it that way. And I do think that really did impact eventually my relationships, because then when I did eventually, it's later on, maybe May, June of my NQT year, go and sit in the English office or go and have some lunch with colleagues, I felt happier. And then I've seen that with colleagues, like with mentees, but also colleagues, experienced colleagues who just want to sit alone, right? At my lunchtime, because you're just dealing with children all the time. And sometimes you want to be quiet, that's fine. But when you're starting out your career and you're thinking, especially lots, I know lots of amazing colleagues who start their careers and go, I know that in 5 years' time, I want to be a head of department. But then don't have a clue how to do that. And nobody ever teaches them how to explicitly do that either. Like, okay, great, you've got a 5-year plan, but how do you get there? Do you know? And they're like, I don't know. But I just know that's my dream role. And I'm like, that's brilliant. But nobody knows who you are. Nobody, you haven't built a network. You're not, who are you learning from? How are you developing those skills to then have the, we know that whether we like it or not, our reputation speaks for ourselves. It's not sometimes it's our actions almost speak louder than words. And what others say about us also speaks louder than words. And if you are thinking about kind of your support network, having people that you can go to, particularly in your early career teacher, but also throughout your career, is so important. And I think any teacher or any professional will say, having that, Gallup's research did this thing around like, do you have a best friend at work? And so we do this bit of research as a survey every year, like, do you have a best friend at work? And people who tend to say no tend to leave really like the organization quite quickly, because they have nowhere to go to, they have no one to go to, they don't have a network to fall back on. And who teaches our early career teachers about that? And I do think about it from a kind of diversity, equity, inclusion. sort of work as well. Like parts of the chapter, parts of the book does kind of touch upon some of that work, because if we really are inclusive schools, you know, how are we including every member of our school community? And I talk about that in terms of protected characteristics, but I'm also talking about in terms of experience and levels of experience. Sometimes, you know, our more experienced colleagues, you know, say all these NQT, you know, I've heard that because I've been in that situation where people are like, all these NQT. And actually, it's like, how exciting is it that we've got these amazing young colleagues, you know, it's not always young colleagues, these new novice colleagues who are coming in excited, enthusiastic. And then we've got other colleagues going, oh, it's a bit crap. Oh, it's really hard work. And it's really, and the book is meant to be a positive, you know,
Yeah.
book that is meant to be like, hey, you know what, it's blooming hard, but it's the best job in the world, because that's how I feel about the job. And that's why I've stayed without a break. You know, lots of my friends have gone abroad who have, you know, taken time off, traveled, and I've just I have stayed in teaching consistently since the age of 22 to now, yeah, 37. And everyone's like, how do you do it? You know, and that's a really interesting thing to think about, because then the biases of people is like, oh, it's because you don't have kids, that's why you haven't taken a break. Or you know, there's so many things that come out of conversations. And I think, you know, networks are really important for our new teachers and our, you know, novice teachers, but also for our experienced teachers. And having a novice is just a real breath of fresh air, I think. And a new teacher is a real breath of fresh air in any organization. And I think it's our role, particularly if you're experienced, to keep that going and not to dampen their light and to try and switch that light off, but is actually say, hey, you know what, let's try and brighten that light. Let's spotlight you a little bit. Let's champion you. Let's give you the space so that your light is brighter, rather than going, oh, don't like that light, let's try and dim it.
Yeah.
I mean, you've just reminded me of a wonderful colleague that I used to work with called Roz, and she was still teaching in her 70s. We had quite a lot of ECTs in the school at various times. And one of the things that Roz used to do was every lunchtime, she used to do a little round of the building and round them all up and kind of get them to come and have a cup of tea in the staff room. Not every day, obviously, they were busy. But she had one eye. She wasn't a formal mentor, but she just used to say, come in, come and have a cup of tea, come and have a chat with this. And it was those kind of informal conversations of recognizing, yes, that class is a very challenging class for everybody. Or that, you know, yes, I've had it was really refreshing for some ECTs to hear an experienced teacher say, I have just had a nightmare of a lesson. It's just gone horribly wrong. Because if you're not hearing people celebrate their good, the bad, and the ugly, you can, as an ECT, really easily think, I've got to be perfect all the time. They must have it licked, because it's such an isolating role sometimes, because you're often the only adult that you see for long periods of time. And it's easy to think that everybody else has got it sorted. And it's only through having those incidental conversations that you begin to think, well, actually, I don't need to know it all. Not everybody knows it all already. So I always think of Roz rounding everybody up and saying, come and have it. How'd you have your tea? Do you want a biscuit? Come and sit here. She's a force to be reckoned with, and she's only just left education, sort of late 70s. So hats off to Roz, who was at the other end of the experience.
I love that. And I do think everyone needs somebody like that. And sometimes, you know, one of the things I say in the book is, you might not have those people. Go and be that person. Go and find out. And that's quite scary. I know that some of the things I say is like, oh, why are you telling, you know, an ECT to think about their 5-year plan? But that's important, because we want to keep them in the profession. And then when you look at the data from the NFER, you know, around ethnic heritage, people from diverse ethnic heritage, they're applying for jobs. Why? They're applying for, you know, ITT and teacher training, but they're not getting in. What is it that's stopping them? And how do we provide the space to really understand those barriers and then support them to stay, when they are in teaching, stay in teaching? That's really important to me. And I hope that the book provides them with really practical advice, actually, just really practical advice about, you know, yes, it is a bit hard, but actually, here's some strategies to help you, and here's some people you can go to, you know, on social media, even if you don't have them in your organization. Here's how you can build an external network, is one of the kind of subheadings. Contact Diverse Ed, contact, you know, walkthroughs, contact Chartered College of Teaching, because all of these safe networks are being created to support you. And people don't forget that, because it can feel very lonely, like you just said, Emma, because it can just feel like you in your class. But in primary school, you know, it's just you in your class. And secondary, it's like, it can just feel relentless in all phases. Doesn't matter where you teach. You know, it's challenging, particularly at the moment.
I think that's what's so interesting about this, because and it's one of the reasons I really rate this book, because I feel like it's sort of and also the wider work you're doing is because I feel like you're one of the people that I think of as someone who is a kind of champion of the profession, a kind of, as well as modeling the work you do, but also just fueling the profession in a talking up sort of way, so makes it feel like I want to be part of this. We're a whole community of practitioners across the world, across the UK, whatever, in England, in London, and that sense of collective is such an important force for people wanting to be in, rather than the falling kind of all the challenges. And it's you've got the whole thing about workload. So there's a whole sort of thing as like teaching behavior, getting to use the school, then you've got workload as well. And it's all really sound stuff about just managing yourself, managing a person, because ultimately teachers are just people who work in schools.
Exactly.
You need to feel like it's manageable, that you can control it, that you can make it a job that's yours, that you then love, and being surrounded by people. So I love the fact that you're reaching out to those people. I've come across them, the kind of slightly lonely teacher who's hidden away, and then with a diversity and inclusion hat on. I mean, it's just a fact. We've talked about it with many of our guests about people needing to see themselves, and it goes right down to sort of kids seeing themselves in the curriculum, but teachers seeing themselves as people, models that they can aspire to being. And someone like you, who's, right, there aren't a lot of people who reach the senior levels of school leadership. And Emma's talked about this a lot: family pressures, flex. I mean, do you feel like that's something that comes up with you, the need for flexible working?
Yeah, I think it's really lots of people say to me, why do you do this? Why are you always at a conference on a Saturday? Or why are you always tweeting away? Do you ever sleep? So one of my colleagues went, do you ever bloody sleep? And I said, I do. I've got ADHD. So, it's just a bit harder for me. And I'm always, and it's just part of my neurodiversity. But for so long, it has felt like there just was nobody that looked like me. And so I decided to become that person. And I realized that I was really supported through my coaching, through like Booker Yusuf, who's the first hijabi woman that I saw on Twitter, on X. And I was like, oh yeah, I want her to be my coach. And then realized, oh, there was a DFE Women Ed coaching program that was free and Booker was on it, and kind of like stalked her and got got her email. I went, can you coach me, please? I'm an aspiring assistant head. And at this time I was a lead practitioner, really kind of obsessed with teaching and learning, but nothing else much, and never thought that I could get into senior leadership because I did not see anybody. And this is at my current school, and I'm honest about this. And at Sarah Burnell, there was nobody that was of diverse backgrounds in any form of visibility. And it was really powerful kind of to have that coaching to say, hey, you know what, you can do it. And then to see somebody like Bookie, I was like, oh, okay, she understood. And the challenges that Muslim women face are very different to what some other, groups of people might face. And I faced that firsthand as an NQT in my first school. And I'm glad I did that. I know that's so weird to say and it's strange to say, but the fact that I left Tower Hamlets, which, if you don't know it, has a lot of people that look like me, 70% Bangladeshi, British Bangladeshi community, to go to a community where people don't look like me, and then to say, hey, yes, I'm going to face all of these things. And I didn't expect it at that level. But then to leave and at the end and people saying to me, oh yeah, you've changed the way in which I think about Muslim women, was the thing I realized that I could be the change that I wanted. And then I've just spent my career trying to become the change. And somehow, I say somehow, but like I've got to this point in my career where I'm, an assistant head, deputy head, and doing all these amazing things. And I'm very blessed, but I do think coaching has really supported me in being able to do that. I faced a lot of biases and microaggressions along the way and barriers along the way, where people have said things like, people I've worked with have said things like, oh, we must think about the way we speak to our students, and not directly at me, but when you're the only person of color and you're the only person who's got a bit of a Cockney accent, I have to really tone my Cockney accent down. I grew up on the Isle of Dogs, and so when you hear things like that from colleagues, automatically I'm like very cautious of the way I speak, the way I come across. People used to make comments, oh, but you're married now, so does that mean you're going to have a baby and you're going to leave? Because that's what you guys do, right? Like, this is from colleagues that I worked with, and I won't name names, but this is the kind of barriers we face. I don't know. And I think it's really important to say those sorts of things, because people think it doesn't happen. And they assume that because I've got to this position, none of those things could have been true. But the thing I've realized is, despite all of those things, I've been able to get through to this point because of the networks I've had. And I know for a fact that coaching, women ed, diverse ed, Chartered College of Teaching, having those networks like Research Ed, and have really supported me in becoming confident in my own abilities. And even now I feel a bit awkward to say that, but Women Ed has taught me to be 10% braver and to accept. And it's not bragging if it's based on facts. And then training other people and coaching other women, and particularly or people from protected characteristics, to believe the same, that it's not bragging if it's based on facts. Because for so long, particularly from my community, what's happening again, guys?
Firework display again.
Maybe it's like a gesture that I'm doing. But
I think what's quite good is it came at the right time, because you're talking about bragging based on sort of explosion on your
yeah, Muslim women particularly, but Bangladeshi women have been taught, and I was taught by my family, be quiet, be humble, don't brag, don't talk too loud. You're not meant to share. You just be happy that you're here. I mean, that was my dad. Just be happy that you're in the Queen's country. That's what I was brought up to believe. And then now we give back to the country, and education is the gateway to do that and share that. And if you want to change perceptions, my dad used to say, and mum used to say, the best way to do it is by living your values, and then be positive, be a positive force in the world. And that's what I've tried to do, despite those barriers and despite those kind of things that people say and do, because ultimately we've got to become the change that we want to see.
Well, I think that's fantastic. So, I mean, I know, Emma, have you ever directly been involved with Women Ed?
Yes, I have a chapter in one of their books that I co-wrote with my former co-head colleague Claire Mitchell, now Moran, about co-headship and flexible working. So yeah, was involved with Women Ed in their first book, and they had the second one. Have they got a third one coming out, Yamina? Yeah. But I just wanted to ask you, and it kind of links into what you've been saying about something that you talk around about inner critics. So I shan't say exactly the phrasing of it, because it's a beautiful thing. So I'd like you to sort of say it yourself. But what do we do with that inner critic if we are feeling like we can't be the change that we want to see, or it's too difficult, or we feel like we might be bragging? Is it based on facts? All of these questions that kind of buzz around. Could it be me? Should it be me? Can it be me? All of those things. It's what you say about inner critics. I just found the whole way that you described that absolutely beautiful. If you wanted to expand on
it now, I've probably forgotten what I've written, because I write so many things about it being an. I've got this like ridiculous inner critic, and I've muted it. I say muted it, but even now I'm like, what am I doing here? And I have to really sit and really think about my feelings and how I'm feeling. So in the book, I actually talk about like separating facts and feelings and basing it on data, and really being 10% braver in all aspects of my life, not just work, but in all aspects of my life, kind of not listening to that inner critic and saying, hey, let's stop it at that point, really understanding it. Right now, I feel like I'm not good enough to be on this podcast. Well, I must be good. Like this is me right now, by the way. I'm like internalizing. Then I have to stop myself, say, well, okay, what does the fact say? Well, facts say that Tom and Emma asked me to be on, but I didn't ask for it. They've asked me to be on. So there must be a reason why I've been asked to be on this. And okay, yeah, I've got a bit of credibility. I've written a book. I have to say these things to myself. And then I've tried to write about that in the book and say, when you are feeling those things, there is a cycle within ourselves where we can become obsessed with those feelings. But facts don't care about the feelings, as the kids say. The facts speak for themselves. And I think it's really important to listen to those facts and build and then reach into our networks and think about what our networks might say about us. But I'm sure there's a phrase I've said, Emma, and I've probably forgotten what I've written.
You need to stop thinking about what other people might be saying. And I just thought that was really a really beautiful way of looking at it. Just give yourself permission to say, stop worrying about what everybody else is thinking and just get on with being fabulous.
Yeah, I think for so many people, particularly women, I have to say, but for so many people, we do care about what other people think. And I say that a lot of this book is about me. Let's be honest, it's so much about my experiences. And then people I talk to, and they're like, yeah, I feel exactly the same way. But I'm upset. I'm a people pleaser. I'm a self-proclaimed people pleaser. And I can become obsessed with the way others think about me. But in the book, I'm just like, just stop it. Because ultimately, if you are truly about the young people that you serve and the communities you serve, then you're going to forget about what other people are saying, and then you're just going to be your authentic self. And throughout my career, you know, I thought I had to be dressed a particular way, look a particular way. But now I'm just very much my authentic self. I wear my hijab the way I want. I speak the way I want. And I still know that I'm a credible leader and an authentic leader. And that's what makes me powerful, is what I've realized, because that's what makes me cool and unique. Because if I'm like everybody else, what's different? Nobody's going to remember me. Whereas I've been lucky enough to be my authentic self, and people are like, oh, yeah, it's that Yamina, you know, the loud one, the bubbly one. And I'm like, okay. And for so long, I muted that because I thought I had to.
Well, I'm glad that we've been able to support you unmuting that in some way through this. And it's great. I mean, you know, the fact that we, you know, your enthusiasm for teaching and learning, I was aware of that through your engagement in social media for a long time. And then seeing, you know, you come through. So this book was a kind of trigger for us to invite you, but we were well aware of your work from before then. We actually have a secret rule. I don't know if it is that secret, but one of our rules is if anyone ever asks to go on the podcast, we always say no. So, because we always feel like,
Did you put any more, Sean?
because we feel like, well, part of there's so many cool people to talk to, and we just have a long list. But it is about just sort of people getting on with their stuff, and you know, we curate the people that we want to make an interesting thing. And I'm absolutely thrilled that you are our final guest of the season, because I think you really bring it down to the sort of like the roots of what great teaching is about, and what leadership's about. Is like fostering that community culture for teachers to be part of this profession, so that they can support young people and be role models and all the rest of it. So look, honestly, just we have to bring it to an end there. But thank you so much for being a guest on our show.
I am absolutely honoured. This is going to go on my daily journal about the things I did that made me smile. So thank you so much for inviting me. I really appreciate it.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Thank you. It's been a delight to talk to you tonight. So thanks for coming on.
Thank you, Emma. Thank you,
So
Tom.
we're going to do a final show wrap up, but we'll say goodbye to you now, Yamina, and we'll see you good soon. Best of luck with the book.
Thank you so much, Tom and Emma. Have a good evening.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay, well, that was our final guest of the season. Absolutely amazing. And we're just gonna finish this episode by making a bit of an announcement, which is I'm taking a break. So I'm going to say that to everyone now listening in. As of the end of August, I'm taking a 6-month break from all work, which is very exciting. With my wife, we're going on a 6-month sabbatical, and we're going to be going to Australia and Indonesia. And I won't be able, therefore, to carry on doing this podcast with Emma. But it's been an amazing 4 years. I'm going to be coming back, but it has been an amazing 4 years, Emma. So I want to say a huge thank you to you for.
Oh, thank you. I'm so sad, but I'm so pleased for you that you're going on your sabbatical. I should be so sad without you whilst you're gone, enjoying the sights and sounds of the wider world outside education.
I've got a couple of jobs. There's a couple of events I'm doing in Sydney and Melbourne in October, and in Tasmania, and one in Perth, I think. But we just, my wife has reached a point where she's not retiring but taking a break, and we thought, well, this is the time to do it. So walkthroughs is going to be in the capable hands of my colleagues there, and mind the gap. Announcement time. We have recruited.
Haven't you got a drum behind you? We need a drum. We've got every instrument there possible apart from a drum kit.
to take over from me, so that Mind the Gap carries on, we have invited, and he has accepted, John Hutchinson, who is going to take over to be a co-host with you, Emma. So I'm really thrilled about that. He was a brilliant guest. We had him on earlier, and he knows a lot about education in lots of different ways that I have no clue about. So he'll be amazing. So he is going to be metaphorically keeping my seat warm.
Keeping me in check, Tom. That's what he's going to be doing as well whilst you're gone.
Look, Emma, best of luck with the podcast in the 6 months while I'm away. Go well. I'm sure you do brilliantly. I'll try to listen to it from time to time.
I wait for feedback.
Yeah, absolutely. But look, so with that announcement made, we don't want to make too big a fuss of that, but it's been a real pleasure for me to be part of this. It's been amazing. And I think by the time we finish and all this will go out, there's 84 episodes we'll have done together, which is, I think, absolutely wonderful. So thank you to everyone who's listened, allowed us to grow this audience and the kind of interest in Mind the Gap, and especially to all the guests who've given their time to be part of it. And thank you, keep listening and have a great summer, those of you who are about to go into the summer. Emma and John will be back in September.
We shall see you there. Me and John will be there, bright and breezy, ready to go.
Okay, so this will for the last time, for some time, I'll say thank you for listening to Mind the Gap, making education work across the globe, and we'll see you really soon.
Thank you for listening to Mind the Gap. I'm Emma Turner and I've been presenting with my co-host Tom Sherrington. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave us a review, share on social media and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Find us on our YouTube channel, search for Mind the Gap with Tom and Emma, or head over to Spotify for an audio version. This podcast was produced in association with Haringey Education Partnership, and our producer for today's episode was Luke Kemper.